of people with a wide variety of point of views, not just my point of view, because that's no fun doing it that way, right? But before we get into too much further, I want to bring your attention to something. Okay, everybody who watches this show knows that I don't work for Bixie, but I interact with a lot of Bixie people. And one of my best friends at Bixie, Nelson Cullen, has had several strokes over the last week and a half. And he's got two daughters. He's a single dad. He's having obviously some financial issues or whatever. So there's a GoFundMe account for him. So if you see a QR code in the right there, upper right hand corner, uh, please scan that. Go to the GoFundMe to help fund him because he's having to go to all different kinds of doctors and stuff, and the prognosis is looking good. It's looking good, but you know, as you can imagine, doctor's visits and daycare for your kids while you're doctor, bills are stacking up. Bills are stacking up. So let us, the industry, show some love towards Nelson. Like he does a lot of the coordination for sales training and stuff like that for Bixie. Please take care of them. Well, you guys know me, and from 2 weeks ago, you probably remember we had a person on the show who was having problems with their video, and they got it working. Kevlin, since you since you didn't make it to the show last time, tell us who you are and why you're here.
Wow, Chuck, I'm honored. Thank you for the introduction. And I've been looking forward to joining you for real with video for a really long time. And just thank you for the opportunity. My name's Kevlin Pascos, and I have been involved in the integration sector, the ICT infrastructure world for about 20 years as a business development salesperson, and just recently migrated over to the marketing of technology and construction, et cetera. And I am affiliated with Bixie in a way that I adore Bixie. I love everything that they are all about. And I have a lot of friends that are Bixie credentialed, and I have just really been intrigued by what they have to offer. And I'm not affiliated with Bixie other than I just really want to keep sharing awareness and help empower other women and young folks in the industry and share the word with you, Chuck. So thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, and the topic for this show was actually Kevlin's idea. She wanted to talk about. Well, actually, she gave me a list of like 5 ideas, and I was like, that one I get more questions about. So let's do that one first. So we're talking about requests for proposals and walkthroughs, but more focused on walkthroughs, right? So I don't want to assume that everybody knows what a request for proposal is. RFP, again, acronyms. Basically, a customer will put out a request to multiple contractors to have them bid on jobs. Now, I didn't want this to be a show just about Chuck's perception of walkthroughs. That's why we got Kevlin here, and that's why we've ensembled some industry icons. Industry icons. I see them smiling in the backstage area because I didn't want
That's
to
right.
use I didn't want to use the term expert. So the first one I want to bring on is Mr. Mark Higginson. Mark is bringing the large contractor point of view to an RFP walkthrough. Mark, why don't you give us the 15-20 second of who you are?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me in. I've been in low voltage technologies for 23 years. I'm vice president in Compass Connect. We're audiovisual and low voltage IT infrastructure installer, design, installation, service, full spectrum.
Mr. Mark, like me, is also an RCDD. He's
Thank you.
also a CTSD and a CTSI. Now, I know what those are, but what are those in a nutshell, real quickly, for those who may not know what those mean?
Well, much like Bixie represents the telecommunications world, and thanks for catching me on that, Chuck. Avixa is specialty for the audiovisual world. So they parallel each other. They cover some of the same topics. All of the AV technologies live on cabling, so they go hand in hand. And in addition, I also have a CompTIA A+ for the networking side.
Yeah, you didn't have that one listed on your LinkedIn profile, I don't think.
Not in my title name.
Yeah, yeah,
Couldn't
yeah.
do the plus.
So to bring us the point of view from a small contractor, I have my mentee from last year. As many of you know, I participated in the Bixie mentoring program. Eric was assigned to me last year. Eric has a small little contractor in Georgia. Is it North? No, South Georgia. Or is it Atlanta? Audio, microphone,
South, Macon, Georgia.
Macon, Georgia. There you go.
Yeah.
Eric is has his own company, so he's bringing the small contractor's point of view. Eric is a certified installer fiber, and he's working towards his RCDD.
Correct.
Now, you and I got to talk about that. You know,
Correct.
give us the 15, 20-second view of your history, Mr. Eric.
So basically, I'm the owner of Quest Contracting and Engineering LLC. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I did a lot of electrical and low voltage in the Army. I am a Bixie Fiber and Bixie Installer 1. And my target customer is the U.S. government.
Nice. And to round out the panel for tonight, bringing us a customer's perspective. Love the background. Justin Hobbs, he's an RCDD. He's a Bixie technician. He's also CM and ACE. Those are two acronyms I am not familiar with, Justin. You're going to have to educate me.
Well, they're aviation specific. So if you want the 15, 20 second, so I've been in technology since I was 8 years old. I was born in 1980. I'm old, so we're not going to go there. So long time. I've been on both sides of the house. I've been on the logical side, the physical side, i.e. I was a network engineer. I was a server admin. I've worked in every single sector there ever was, sort of, I guess. There's probably some I haven't. But aviation was one of the things that, I really specialized in. I'm not in aviation anymore. Now I've moved over to healthcare. But I did work for an installer company for quite a number of years. And then I moved over to the customer/owner side. And now I'm doing more on the customer owner side, but I'm doing more on the design side than I ever have.
Right.
So
Yeah. So you can actually bring two different points of view, like the customer's perspective and as a contractor perspective. I'm relying heavily on your customer's perspective today, but if you have some input for the contractor side, I'm fine with that too. This is all about educating, encouraging. So I want to start off with you, Justin, right? So let's say you're a customer and you have some work that you want to get done. How do you know who to invite? What's the process to invite somebody to come do a walkthrough for a bid?
it depends on if it's informal or formal. An RFP is more formal, right? And coming from like a local government sector, RFPs are they're high dollar value, So obviously there are state regulations that you have to deal with. There's local government regulations you have to deal with those dollar amounts, right? Because you're in the government sector, you're dealing with the public's money. So that's why you do the RFP, because it's very formal, it's very open, it's very transparent. So from the customer's perspective, what you want to do is you want to get your act together, period. All right. I'm a very straightforward guy. If you don't like what I have to say, I'm sorry. I'm going to shoot you straight. Get your act together as a customer. Okay. You need to understand, number one, what you want. Number two, you need to quieten down all these folks that are going to be coming out of the woodwork to say, oh, you're going to do this. I got this problem I want to solve too. You got this money. I want to spend some too. No, you need to figure out what you want. Keep your scope very clear and concise, right?
Oh, there's a can of worms right there, Justin. Okay.
Yeah.
So by a
tough.
show of hands, who's ever responded to an RFP where they copied and pasted stuff wrong?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'll raise my hand.
So that's why I said that's cracked me when you said you got to get your details right.
You got to get your act together as a customer. You got to know what you want. You got to know how you want it done. But then again, I've got eight bullet points as a customer, that I could go through.
Yeah. Just go ahead.
Well, actually, let me digress. I've got 8 bullet points that are actually more for the contractor side, but it does kind of flow into the owner side. But as the owner, you really got to get your act together, know what you want, get it in writing, talk with the key stakeholders, not the folks that are trying to muscle their way into your RFP, right? And And always remember the human factor. If you're soliciting contractors, remember that these are people too. You know, a lot of times owners and customers will have this holier than thou mentality that, oh, well, they're here to serve me and do what I want to do, and I'm going to lord over them. That's wrong. There's a human factor to that. These are people that are just trying to make a living too. So you got to keep that in the back of your mind. If you have your act together, you know what you want to do, and you solicit, you know, you can solicit who you want to, or you can actually, with an RFP, you can actually solicit to a very slim amount of, you know, vendors. You can pick, you know, you can tailor the RFP for one vendor if you want to. That's the shady side of it. But
let's talk about the human factor for a second.
I like that too.
Yeah. I'm going to open it up to everybody, right? So Mark, you being a bigger contractor, when you go to attend these walkthroughs, how do you view the other people that are doing the walkthrough? Do you feel like you're a part of it? Do you feel like because you're a bigger contractor that you can rough over everybody, or because you're a big contractor, do you walk on eggshells?
I'm there to take in information. So I really do observe who signs into the list, who's punctual. And often you brought up an incredible point there. The customer needs to be prepared for this to be successful. If the needs aren't, you know, part of the scope of work, it's never going to come out with something the customer is actually happy with. A formal RFP is actually our least favorite kind of work. We strive for direct relationships with ownership because we also do design, service, implementation of multiple services. So, but of course, we do want some of these bigger jobs. These are the higher dollar jobs. You know, that does typically come from public sector. And it has to be transparent. You know, it's our money too.
One of the things I liked about doing the walkthroughs is, I always asked for a copy of the sign-in sheet.
Yeah.
So that way I knew everybody was there. And
I make my own copy.
Well, sometimes they held that pretty closely. They had it on their clipboard, and and nowadays it's easy. You just take your cell phone, click, got it, right? But back when I was an estimator, nobody had cell phones. That shows how old I am. And but it also gives you a glimpse of who you're competing against. So as an estimator, if I was bidding against like people like your caliber, Mark, or not caliber, but people your size, that's one train of thought. But if I was competing against smaller contractors like Eric, that's going to tell me, okay, I need to be a little bit more lean, because Eric's small company doesn't have the same overheads that I would have as a national contractor, right? So that's something I always looked at.
And you know what else that sign-in sheet does for me as a small business is introduce me to potential partnering companies. You know, I look at that sheet and I say, okay, well, he's in this area, I'm in this area. This is a potential company that I may be able to partner with. So it's a lot of advantages to it.
Kevin, what's your thoughts? Because you're probably when you attend these things, you're going to be a minority as a lady. What's your thoughts, perceptions of attending these walkthroughs?
Well, I like what Justin and Mark just said about the human factor, right? And the goal really is even if it's not an even playing field, but to go in and what Mark had said is have the customer needs to be prepared. So I'm sure each of you have been on walkthroughs that there's something missing, or the guys that are attending the walkthrough don't have the answers that you are asking. And so right away for me, in my experiences, if you're not prepared and you don't have the information that this team of people are going to show up to your doorstep asking, then that kind of gives me an idea of maybe that this is how it's going to go throughout. And you're right. Often I've been a minority, but that doesn't really bother me so much as just seeing the alliances, and it's quite obvious the posturing and the friendships, and watching these guys trip over themselves to get closer to the customer, the person in charge. But I've always approached walkthroughs as an objective opportunity to take that information home. And then also, if someone's asking a really good question that maybe I didn't think of, then I'm going to write that down or take note of that, because that actually was a really good question. And I'm going to bring that back to the team and have that on my notes in addition to that. But it's always been quite an interesting cattle call, if you will, to see who the players are, and just behaviors, and just sometimes just being there to listen, and hopefully that there's enough information that's been shared and asked that you can create a nice report for yourself.
Well, here's the dirty secret about walkthroughs that most customers may not understand. Contractors in an area, when you start doing jobs like we're doing formal walkthroughs, you see the same people over and over and over again. You develop relationships, and quite often, the people you're doing walkthrough used to work for you, or you used to work for them, or each other outside. So but it's like as soon as they're like, okay, we're going to start this meeting, whoop! I mean, it sucks all the personality out of the room.
Definitely.
All the personality. So Justin, what was your second bullet?
So from the owner's perspective, I talked about like scope, like nail this down, right? So as my time in the aviation sector as an owner, when we did RFPs, bids, things like that, one of the things I really tried to do internally was work through the finance team to make sure that in the purchase order, when it got cut, we had a separate line item for materials.
Right.
And this is the human factor, right? So as you the vendor, you the contractor, I don't want you to have to go out of pocket for all your materials day
Gotcha.
one. No, I want you to go ahead and bill for those materials so you can buy these materials. Because you as the vendor, you're going to go out to these distribution companies, you're going to have to get a line of credit or something. You're going to have to spend, I don't know, 50, 70, 100, I don't know, whatever, umpteen thousands of dollars for these materials up front. So me as a customer, trying to think about you as the vendor, having been a vendor, it's good for your business and good for me if I can make sure the finances are there and ready to go, right? Same thing with labor. Allow you to bill your labor incrementally. What I'm trying to do is to think of you as a business and you as a person and the folks that work for you to try to take care of them. Let you bill for your materials up front, so that's paid for. And then your labor, you got to pay your folks, I don't know, weekly,
Right.
every 2 weeks, whatever. Make sure that you as a company have the dollars in your bank to pay your folks so that our work gets done.
The thing I take away from that strikes me the most is, and I wish when I did walkthroughs, I had more customers like you, because you realize that it's a relationship, and the better we are for as far as getting together, the better success you're gonna have for that project, right?
Yeah, it is a
I've
relationship.
done lots of projects where
and
they didn't break out the labor, and you're right. That's one of the first things you got to buy is the labor. I mean, not the labor. I'm sorry, the materials, right?
It doesn't get any
Take
easier
care.
as you grow too. Those numbers just get bigger. The material loadouts just get larger. The
Right.
payroll just gets higher. So progressive billing, reaching milestones with customers, transparency, breaking out your billing in a way that's understandable, so they can see your point of view too, is really a key to being successful in multiple jobs, especially when they land all at the same time.
So Eric, I know that you pursue a lot of government work,
Mhm.
and government's really good with the formal RFP process.
They are.
And you're a small contractor. It's hard for you to absorb a large bill of materials and stuff, right? So what's your perspective on this?
Well, it's very hard. So a lot of times, that's why as a small business, I look for teaming partners. Sometimes the bigs, or sometimes just another small business, just to help, to take in those costs. But from my experience, most of the time with the RFPs, when you get there, a lot changes anyway. They're asking your opinion, so they're kind of writing down, taking notes as you're answering the questions that they need to know. So to me, it's never just cut and dry. It's
Right.
always something new as you go along. So I make sure I got a camera. I make sure I got a big thick notebook. So I'm taking pictures and I'm taking notes.
One of my tricks is I would always find a project manager in the office who aspired to be an estimator, and I said, "Come on with me this walkthrough. You're the note taker."
Oh, yeah.
That way, I could focus on body language and questions, and I know they're capturing all the details. Remember, document, right? And somebody mentioned earlier about the questions, and the thing I like about the questions is you maybe think of a question, but you may not feel comfortable enough to express that question because you're in a group of people that that are RCDDs and they've been in the industry for 30 years, and you don't look like an idiot, but yet they'll ask the same question. It's like, yes,
Right.
And
So that was a time, Chuck, me as a small business when I would go, and it's great that you bring that point up. So when I initially started, that was a bit of intimidation. I would sit back and just kind of listen to everybody else ask the questions, and someone would always ask the question that I had in mind. So now, if it's a question I won't answer, I'm going to ask it regardless. So, yeah.
That vacuum of knowledge is what led me to get the RCDD. I wanted to understand. I wanted to be confident in asking the questions I needed to. One of the tricks that I use for RFPs are, like I said, most of our meetings are actually direct with clientele, which is our favorable situation. But it's one thing to take notes, but I always found myself forgetting to ask questions that I needed to. So I use a software program. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention it or not, but it kind of forces questions so I don't miss them. And it's divided into sections. So if it's not a relevant section, I simply bypass it. And that gives me a PDF report. So a lot of times I will miss those little details, but you can kind of force these questions in, force photos in, force information in before the report can be closed. So I actually do grab these things each time.
Kevin, how do you document walkthroughs?
Well, it definitely is different with each company, right? So some, like what you're saying, Mark, is there might be a software that you can actually input, and it could be through a Bluebeam interface. I don't remember the one that I really, really liked, but it was on a workbook, a software laptop, if you will. And I found that a little cumbersome. So I myself, like you're saying, Mark, I've got my list of questions now that I would ask, and then the pictures, you've got your cell phone right there. And I do them in chronological order so that when we're walking, I'm not taking pictures after we're done with the walkthrough, like, hey, can I go back? And if so, I know that I need to put that in some sort of a document or a folder right quick, and I give descriptions, whatever floor that we might be on or whatever area that we might be on, etc., especially room numbers, so that when my team is going back to estimating the project, the photos are clear and it's not fuzzy. And so that is huge. Like, if not that evening or that afternoon, the next day those pictures get labeled. But I have something I wanted to bring up from a customer's point of view as far as the materials. I've seen RFPs that are fill in the blanks, tell us what you got. Yeah, it's an opinion and you're supposed to help them, right? But in a way, it's supposed to be transparent and partnership. And I felt that the RFPs that are worded or structured like that, where it's fill in the blanks, how much is this going to cost us in resources and time to create a solution for them that it's not even guaranteed at that point? And we're talking hundreds of hours, right? So I've always preferred an RFP that give me some part numbers ish, even if it's going to be, because even if you're not an incumbent, I'm new to the scene. I don't know what your head end is. I don't know what systems that you're using. I don't know if this is a national situation where you've got them across different sites, or if this is a localized. So it helps. It just, to me, it levels a playing field when you provide materials listing and it's specific. Even if we might say, well, you need more coverage with a camera in that corner and you didn't ask for it, that could be possibly an addendum that you can state. So what are your thoughts about that, Justin?
No, I love what you're talking about, and you hit the nail right on the head. Okay. in my experience, that oh my gosh,
You okay? You're right.
you're right on. You're right on point. Okay, so from an owner's perspective, it should be the owner's responsibility to have a owner's standard. This is what you want. This is how you want it done. These are the applicable standards. These are the applicable codes. These are the applicable regulations that you need to follow. Here's our part numbers. Now, some government entities cannot specify part numbers. It's illegal in some states. I know it's illegal in North Carolina. Okay, so that's where the owner has to come out of the woodwork and go performance based. Okay, little dirt here. Okay, a lot of manufacturers have performance based language for their part numbers that you can put into your RFP so that you get that part, right? That's a little loophole. Don't shoot me for it, but it is what it is. But you're right. You're absolutely right. The owner has got to get their act together. And Chuck, if I can kind of switch over to the vendor side for a second and talk about a few things. So as a vendor, this is from my experience, some of the things that, I always did when I went to an RFP walkthrough. Number one, I looked at age. How old is it?
Yes.
If I'm in a greenfield construction, brownfield, how old is it? If it's something from the 1980s, Lord knows what I'm going to run into there when I start popping tiles or where I'm going to be. I might run into, we've all seen
Coax.
There's no telling what you're going to run into. Oh, no. Type 2. Type 1, type 2. Okay, been running into that mess. Second thing is history. These are questions you can ask your customer, okay? How has this changed over time when you walk into a site? Ask the customer that. How has it changed? Let them talk. Some people like to talk. I guess I'm one of them, right? Third thing is, what's existing? What do they currently have? When you go walk through, ask, hey, what do you currently have? Who are you using? What manufacturers? What do you like? What you don't like, right? The fourth thing you can ask is future. What's being planned? There are some buildings that they have plans for expansion. This is in the aviation sector. This is in the corporate sector. This is in the healthcare sector. Hospitals are always growing. Airports are always growing. Things like that. Campus environments are always growing. So what is planned? So then you as the vendor can go, oh, okay, this is what they're going to be doing. Here's what I can do as part of my RFP to help that. You're trying to build that relationship, right? And then the number 5 point is your AHJ. Is this AHJ a flat out asshole, or are they a decent person to work with? It's a mixed bag. We all know that, right? The 6th point that I have, it falls on both sides. So that's the applicable owner standards. Do they have one? If not, they should. And that's where folks like us, RCDDs, techs, CTS, Ds, CTSIs, these folks that know this stuff, this is where we're valuable. They just don't realize it yet. Okay. The number 6 point on the owner side is fairness. Yeah. Be fair to your vendors, right? So I'll give you an example. In doing RFP walkthroughs and talking with various vendors, one thing that I always told them was, let's go ahead and add in the quote unquote headache factor. That's and Chuck's like, what is that? The headache factor. This is the legality, the bureaucratic BS that we all have to deal with on both sides of the house that costs us money that's never captured in any scope of work or RF or anything. So I would say let's agree to go ahead and add, say, 5%, and this is with every vendor. They're all standing around. Everybody hears it. Let's add another 5% to your price. I don't care what it is. Add that 5% in for the headache factor, right? That's fairness to the vendor. Okay. Some people might not want to. They don't like
really fair. Yeah.
I'm writing this down.
Right? Hey. All right. I might end up getting.
You're getting customers in trouble because I'm telling you, of all the walkthroughs, well, take it back. No one. I've done one project as an estimator where they said to build in extra. It was actually 20%. It was a bid that I did for the Supreme Court building, And what they told us was, look, when the judges move around in the building, we shut down the building. Everybody's
man.
got to stop what they're doing. Everybody has to be under eyes of Capitol Protection, Capitol Police and stuff. So we know that's going to happen. That's the only bit I've ever had where they said that.
Yeah, it happens, man. Number 7 thing that you need to think about as a vendor is what are the business limitations? Because different business entities have limitations. Coming from the public sector, there were specific limitations, legal limitations, like that we were not allowed to do. For example, we weren't allowed to, we might not be allowed to give them certain documentation, or we might not be allowed to tell them certain aspects because they were federally regulated and they didn't have the appropriate clearances. Those things from an owner's perspective and a vendor's perspective need to be accounted for, right? And then the last point is obviously the human factor. I've already talked about that. Remember, these are people. They might be having a bad day. Their kids might be sick at home. Something. Yep. Have some patience. Have some.
I like what you just said about the limitations, the possible, especially with airports, right? So you've got the federal, the FAA, and I worked on one, and I don't know how many FLIR cameras that it asked for, but it was an insane amount of cameras. But there were so many restrictions in what you could do, and I wanted to bring up the materials again because they always a loophole that I've seen is they won't do the brand, but they'll do the part number.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I've seen the item description used.
The item, but airports, those were some crazy. I did a couple, and perimeter fencing and this, and it has to. The government
airports are wild creatures.
Wild creatures.
They are wild.
Something
creatures.
else they love to do is because especially you see this on the government side a lot, where they can't call out a manufacturer, they can't call out a part number. They will give you the description, and now you have to go to every person who makes that part, and you got to look for, and they'll call out one item, one characteristic that none of the other manufacturers have. You got to figure out who that is.
Right.
That's the performance specification.
Yeah.
Can I say something about that? I did a cannabis university, and they needed everything explosion proof, and it was a Honeywell system. I can't even tell you how many hours I spent trying to find explosion proof door contacts, explosion proof camera housings, and it was possible, but they did give you the parts at least, like to at least know that it was explosion proof. So that was helpful, and you still had to do the homework behind the scenes and get part numbers, obviously for where you felt that the coverage, the camera, door contacts, card readers were necessary. But that was probably the craziest RFP that I've ever had to answer.
Is that an IP rating? Kevin, how does that work?
Go ahead, Mark.
It's just explosion. So in the cannabis where they like do all the chemicals and such, where they house that, apparently even the cable and the wiring, the cameras had to be, they had to be flush mounted. So yeah.
I agree. That sounds like a job for the distributor.
We didn't win it though.
What I need, go ahead, make it happen for me.
And that's what Jasmine just said. Yeah, that's when you rely on your distributor.
Absolutely.
I wanted to bring up the standards that you mentioned. I think that is such a great investment for a company to come up with IT and AV standards. Far more valuable than paying a design firm to come up with one job, to define your needs, to define your end users. Because even cabling, the quality and performance level and price level can be all over the place. Think of an access point. It does one function, but they can cost whatever you want them to.
I think there's too much money that's being made. I don't think a lot of people want that to have a standards.
No, there's definitely there's a reverse side to everything.
Well,
I'm a relationship guy, so I don't make money that way.
So I want to make sure I make this clear for not the panel members here, because I know you guys know, but there might be somebody listening to the show, and when they hear us talking standards, they're probably thinking about the ANSI standard. We're not. We're talking about a standard that a customer generates for their property. For example, every faceplate in an admin area will be a 4-port faceplate with this color jack and that color, blah blah blah, and that way it's the same. That's the standard we're talking about here in this conversation. So just make sure I clarified that.
It works the
That's
same way in AV. If you like how video conferencing works in your Dallas office, you want it to work the same way in DC.
Right.
So coming up with standards is a great way to find local contractors to be able to fill the needs and to be able to build exactly what you want and expect.
And that makes them, I would think that makes the customer's job easier. Maybe Justin can confirm or deny that. But if every building is wired the same, now when your tech team, your IT people go between buildings, they don't have to remember, oh, okay, did they do T568A in this building or was it B?
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And I mean, when I was with the aviation department at City of Charlotte, I had a MACD team, and they were a contract team. But you're absolutely right. I didn't want to have to remember, oh, in this building there's over 300 buildings at that airport. I don't want to go, oh, this building we did this,
Right.
and this building we did that, and this building with that. No, we didn't want to have to stock 60 different manufacturers and 6,000 different part numbers, right? That was ridiculous. So we wanted to try to slim it down as much as possible so that, number one, our total cost of ownership goes down. Number two, when there was an outage or an issue, we could respond rapidly and bring our customer service to the forefront there. Fix it quick, fix it right, and just make it better. Yeah, of course not. That's the point of having a standard. And then it's also a book you can hand to a design team and say, here's your Bible. This is what you need to read. This is what we want. Happy to answer questions, but you need to read
That
it.
addresses the comment that Ed, the old tech guy, said, where the customer takes your design and then they use it to other vendors. If you've already got that design done, then as an estimator, now you're bidding apples to apples, right? Everybody's bids all coming together the same way. You said you had to leave at 6:35, Justin. So I just want to give you a heads up that it's 6:37.
I know. I can go
Okay.
to
Okay.
All right.
I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't know. If you just feel free to drop out one of you. I appreciate you coming on that because rarely do we, as people in the industry, really get exposed to a customer's point of view when it comes to walkthroughs and stuff. Right.
So I have a question for Justin. So
Go ahead.
so we're all over the country, right? I'm in California. Chuck, you're Florida. And so in California, we've got unions that are, it's a very historical, cultural thing around here, right? So we've got the IBW and the other standards, but conduit has been the bane of a lot of these walkthroughs that the guys don't know if they need conduit or not. It's like, I don't know. Is it exposed or is it conduit? And what's in that conduit? So I've experienced a lot of conversation around conduit. Who's providing the conduit? Are you providing it? Are we? Oh, add it in. And because you almost want to do your own conduit, because if someone else is running your conduit, that's not always beneficial. And that's exactly why I would want to partner with somebody like Eric if, say, you did conduit as well, because a lot of the larger integrators and even the infrastructure firms, they don't do their own conduit. So it's always that kind of black hole of, well, who's doing conduit? Who's doing the terminations if it's existing and the liability, and you could go on and on.
Right.
And those are definitely things that you have to make clear during the walkthrough. Because I've gotten there and they say, well, what about the conduit? I said, what about the conduit? It should already be up. I'm ready to pull my cable. I said, well, you're supposed to do the conduit. No, the electrician is supposed to do the conduit. So, yeah. Good
And
point.
see, that's another thing that could be in that owner standard that you can delineate right there in black and white. All conduits shall be provided by either the electrical or the low voltage vendor. You can do either
And
or.
then Eric,
Let it be
All
like
of
that.
our
Eric,
proposals
Paul.
make clear.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And another thing about being prepared, when you talk about the customer being prepared. So I spend 3 months on a customer's job. And for the first 2 months, no one knew how the APs were going to be mounted. So we mounted over 90 APs. Once we got everything up, mounted and running, they came back and they say, hey, well, they all need to be facing this way now. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. You got to be kidding me. So I got to go back and reface 90 APs.
Ouch.
Because, and they would talk about it, but no one would make the decision. It's like, oh, I got to call such and such. I got to call him. I'm like, okay, well, we're on a time frame here.
Ouch.
Oh, and then working normal.
That's that headache factor
yeah.
I was
There you
talking
go.
about.
Yeah.
The headache factor of not being able to work after hours or on weekends or gaining access. And aviation, you're not going to probably gain a whole lot of access on a weekend unless there's somebody specifically,
Well, well,
right?
Just remember, Kevlin, when you've seen one airport, you've only
one
seen
airport.
one
And a lot of people who never done work at airports don't understand this. Just to get on the property, there's a badge you got to get. You lose the badge, there's a huge fine. There's training you got to go through because you can't just drive a vehicle out on a runway because that's a huge safety issue and a huge fine. There's a whole nother layer of stuff that you got to deal with when you're dealing with airports.
And a background check.
Yeah, airport.
Right.
Yeah, it's a 50-state federal background check, but no, airports are wild, and it depends on the airport you work at. I can only tell you what Charlotte Douglas has done. I mean, I can tell you that the maintenance window at that airport, I watched it shrink from 7 hours to 6 hours to 5 hours to 4 hours, meaning that all construction work that you had to do overnight, you only had 4 hours to do it.
Wow.
And you talk about killing a labor budget and a timeline. It's ridiculous.
We got to have more guys out there, right?
Well, you can only have so many folks.
Yeah.
I mean, labor's a big deal. You know, how do you find
getting
qualified
harder.
folks?
Right.
Yeah,
Definitely
you got to
getting
find the appropriate folks. They got to be qualified. They got to be able to pass the background check, drug test, everything. There are so many things they have to be able to pass to even get on site.
Yep.
Well, we're already 10 minutes past, but the 30-minute mark that I was aiming for, and we've only just scratched the surface.
But
That's
Chuck,
right.
look at all the comments. We got to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got tons of comments. We're gonna have to come back and revisit this. So if you guys are interested, maybe we'll look at maybe doing another show in about a month or so, and then
Definitely.
revisit this subject again.
Oh yeah, this isn't over with. So
Yeah, I get because we've just scratched the
continued.
surface.
Part 2.
I'm sure we'll have some additional
Part
war
2.
stories.
Yes.
Yeah, let's bring some more stories.
Yes.
oh,
All right, I appreciate everybody coming on tonight, and for those who are in the audience, please remember to click this QR code right here. Go do the GoFundMe for Nelson Pulon over
Let's help
Bixie
Nelson out.
because he suffered a series of strokes over the last couple of weeks, and he needs help. He just needs help. So,
Yeah.
all right, everybody. I appreciate you
Thanks
coming on.
again.
We'll do this again. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.